think we're live. I think we have 2 viewers already.
Right.
Yes, that's true. Good. Good afternoon, everyone. We're here with David and Fiona from NHS.
Hi.
This is the live Q&A session for the challenge for NHS, how to get smarter outpatient booking systems. We had some questions coming through earlier today that we'll get onto in a section, but first I'll let David and Fiona introduce themselves. Start with David.
Okay, hi, my name is David Pratt. I'm the Improvement Advisor for the National Outpatient Improvement Programme. That's looking at how we can improve all aspects of outpatient services within the NHS. One of the very important things we're trying to look at the moment is how we can improve the booking systems.
I'm Fiona MacDonald. I'm a dermatology consultant working in Greater Glasgow and Clyde, and I'm also the National Clinical Lead for Dermatology with the Outpatients Programme, working with David and CivTech on the booking programme.
We had a video advertising the challenge done by our lovely Fiona, but there's some questions that I actually would like to hear from David as well that we asked Fiona for the video, but I think it'd be good to hear it from you. One of them is, why choose CivTech to look at this rather than going through traditional procurement routes?
I think it's the idea of trying to get new innovative ideas. We don't want to do the same old. We want to try and see what new ideas people can come up with, see what innovative ways there can be of addressing the problems and moving us on. So CivTech certainly looked like it had that ability, that flexibility to both be innovative but also respond to the challenges and developments as the project goes on. So that really appealed to us.
Yeah. Anything to add on that, Fiona?
No, okay.
Let's jump into the first few questions that we've asked through. Some of these questions were sent through to our mailbox. If you have any questions, you can send them to civtech@gov.scot. That's civtech@gov.scot, and I'll read them live, and the guys here will answer them. So the first question that we have here is, how is the booking system anticipated to integrate with current NHS IT infrastructure with respect to access to patient information, clinician availability, rotas, and security?
Well, I think most health boards at the moment have one patient management or patient management service or system called Track Care, and most of the health boards that don't are probably going to integrate into it soon. So I think it would be difficult to remove that to have a completely new program. So I think what you're looking to do is probably integrate with Track Care. Track Care will hold the clinics, will hold the availability of new and return appointments, and the system would be expected to basically integrate with that to allow patients to book into those slots, and the system to show that those patients have booked into a slot, who it is, and that means that the clinicians can see who's attending their clinic.
Yeah. Anything on that?
Can I see the stuff, which because I wrote some stuff on your
Yes.
answer there.
So I'm using, some of these questions came through Public Contract Scotland, but I think it's useful to read them out and to have the guys answering it. Another one is the solution intended to integrate with the current booking system, or could it potentially be a clean replacement solution?
I think I probably anticipated that one, I think.
But again, I think we're open to both opportunities, although obviously it would be a case of seeing what people come up with, see what they want to do. Clearly, there would be challenges with either approach. If you're talking about a new system, you're having to look at how it integrates with existing NHS infrastructure, and you're having to look at possible staff and cultural problems of bringing in brand new systems. Obviously, if you're talking about trying to integrate it with existing systems, you're talking about the legacy systems. You're trying to bring something in that will still be smooth, will be easy to use both on the staff side and the patients when they use it. So I think we're open to both, but clear challenges whichever way people want to go.
I think I would add that I've worked in a couple of health boards, and I would say that I think the booking systems, current booking systems, are very much the same. It's very human. So, I don't think many, we have Track Care and we have humans. So I don't think there are an awful lot of systems at the moment purely based on booking.
Okay. Would the solution be expected to entirely replace phone bookings, or can the innovation include improving the phone booking process?
I don't think we're ever going to get completely away from phone booking. You'll always have some people who either prefer phone, or the digitally excluded people who cannot or do not want to use a website, and so they'll be phoning up. So I think anything we can do to improve that aspect we'd certainly take on board and would be happy to discuss. Although obviously the sort of focus of this is very much about the idea of trying to do an online booking system. So that would have to be first and foremost the main focus of the challenge.
We have a lot of questions today. In the sponsor film, it's mentioned that clinicians book appointments in advance as a safeguard. What are these appointments safeguarding against? So do you want me to read it again? In the sponsor film, it's mentioned that clinicians book appointments in advance as a safeguard for themselves rather than patients.
Oh, right, okay. So you mean the return appointments.
What is this safeguarding against?
I think it's dermatology, particularly, is a specialty that has a demand capacity inequity, and quite often you will be suggesting a treatment options. You will be starting patients on treatments, and booking a return appointment on the day means that you know this patient will be coming back to your clinic. There may not. The reality is, if you don't book them on the day, there may not be capacity, or the patient may not make the appointment without some prompting. So the safeguard is that you simply give them an appointment and the patient chooses whether or not to come or not. That's probably not the best way of booking for a lot of patients because it is relatively inflexible, but that's the best that we have at the moment.
Another one, in the challenge page, it mentions that previous attempts at changing booking practices have yielded little improvements. What have those changes been?
I think probably the way that patients are booked. So they have tried what they call patient-focused booking, which is an invitation for patients to make an appointment, which is what we want to do with this booking system. The difficulty is that it's very labour-intensive. There isn't a system; it goes back to humans again. So if humans are booking the appointments, there are people sitting in a queue for a phone line. There are people frustrated because they can't get through to the phone line, and people trying to change appointments that don't suit them. So I think the difficulty is the efficiency of the system, because it ultimately relies on a bank of people working and a bank of phone lines. Those people are booking news and returns from multiple specialties at the same time. So they just don't have the capacity to be very flexible.
Yeah. I think it might be useful to give a bit of background as well. Traditionally, the way appointments have worked has been the idea that you go in, you see your consultant, and the consultant says, that's fine, we'll see you in 3 months, or we'll see you in 6 months' time. What we're trying to do is we're saying that's inefficient, because there's no guarantee the person actually needs to be seen after 3 months or after 6 months. In quite a lot of cases, particularly with long-term conditions, people will experience flare-ups, but then they'll experience long periods where they don't actually need much additional support. So a lot of the philosophy of this has been about trying to get away from those routine appointments and only try and get people to make appointments when they actually need to see somebody. The idea being that if we can remove those routine appointments, then we'll have capacity in the system to see people when they need to be seen. So a lot of this stuff about trying to do patient-focused booking, it's the idea of giving people the options to make an appointment when it suits them, when their condition has flared up, as opposed to simply saying, see you after 3 months, see you after 6 months. So that's a lot of this sort of underlying philosophy of what we're trying to do.
Another one. One of the metrics for measuring success of the booking system is routine views, and this is in the challenge brief. Could this be clarified? Is this just reviews of other metrics, or what patients and clinicians think of the new booking solution, or is this a specific term, routine reviews?
I suspect that's a specific term about patients. So routine reviews are patients who are coming back for a follow-up appointment, who are not priority patients. So they're not cancer patients, and they're not patients who are on a medication that they might run out of or need specific monitoring for. They're patients where there is a bit of flexibility. The patients who have chronic diseases, these would be the routine reviews. So you'd be expecting those patients, you're expecting less of those patients to be booked on a rigid system and more of those patients to be booked on a flexible when they need to system.
I see. But to not take away that what the patients will think of the new booking system, it will
Yeah.
also be important. It's just not what routine reviews means in this instance.
In that instance, it is a technical term, effectively.
I mean, I think this system is one very much for patients as well. I mean, as a clinician, I spend time working, sitting in clinics and hearing what patients say about not being able to get parked, not being able to get time from off work, not being able, this day suits them, that day doesn't, because some people work part-time and they have days where it doesn't impact on their job to come to clinic and days that it does. So I think patients do want a bit of flexibility about when they come back, and I think they want to not have to sit in a queue of 18 people long waiting to try and change an appointment if it's when they can't attend.
Okay. Well, we have a lot of questions here. Thanks, guys. How much notice do health workers, outpatient services, typically need to be able to book in an appointment with a patient?
We don't actually need any notice at all, but we don't need any notice to book an appointment for a patient. Contacting the patient is a time limiting step, because you couldn't possibly phone every single patient to tell them to come to an appointment. So appointments are sent out in the post, and the idea is that you need to be sending those appointments out 6 weeks in advance to give adequate time for the mail to have reached the patient, and the patient have had time to consider the appointment and accept the appointment. So it's really the other way around. It's the postal system that's a time frame concern. Not it takes us 2 minutes to book a patient onto a clinic. The difficulty is making the patient aware if they've come to that appointment.
I see. Apart from user experience issues mentioned in the brief, do we know anything about why people don't make or keep appointments with outpatient services? So the reasons for DNAs apart from good experience.
I suppose the first one would be, if kind of following on from what I've said, that if people have long-term conditions and they have flare-ups, then if they don't have one at the time of their routine appointment, they might not see any value, they might not see any benefit in attending the appointment. Sometimes, again, if they've got other commitments, jobs, families, cares, that sort of thing, then they might prioritise those over the outpatient appointment. Maybe they've tried to contact us, but they sit in the queue of 18 people and they get down to 9 and then they run out of time. So there could be a bit of that. I don't know if there's anything else, Fiona.
I think it's difficult to get information about failed to attend other than the people who actually engage with the system again. Because if you want to go back to people and ask them why they didn't come to clinic, the people who haven't attended and who aren't interested aren't going to respond to a letter being sent out or a phone call, etc., etc. What we get is the feedback of people who subsequently re-engage with the service, and it's a majority of reasons. There's a variety of reasons, including they forgot because the appointments are sent out so far in advance, and especially return appointments. If an appointment's booked 4 months in advance, then when it comes close to the appointment, they forget which day it was and simply just forget to come. Patients who have last minute kind of changes to work or family commitments and then suddenly can't make it, and again can't spend the time to tell us about it, and patients who say that the mail system fails them and they simply just don't get the appointment. So I think the answer to the question of trying to find out why people fail to attend is the same as is very difficult. The patients who fail to attend are not going to be people who you're in contact with.
Yeah. I've seen a lot of people joined in the past couple of minutes. If you have any questions, again, you can send them to civtech@gov.scot. The bit that you missed in the beginning, the video will be live on YouTube after we ended the session, so you can catch those questions afterwards. Guys, what is the typical time delay between going to an initial GP appointment to then be referred to an outpatient service to then receiving an appointment slot? I think that's a bit of the same question, but is there a set time frame that this process goes through?
The government, sorry, I'm doing a lot of talking.
No, please.
There are specified targets, which there's the 18-week referral to treatment target, which means that from the date the referral is received to when the patient should have their initial treatment is meant to be 18 weeks. There are the HEAT targets, which suggest that their initial appointment should be from 12 weeks of the date of the referral being received. And there's also for cancer patients, for dermatology, that only applies to patients who are considered to potentially have a melanoma, which is a type of skin cancer. It is the 62-day pathway, which means that they should be seen and treated within 62 days. They should be seen hopefully within a couple of weeks, but certainly their initial treatment should be about 31 days after the referral.
So in terms of organising the booking system, what that means is when we're trying to organise the booking systems, there will be requirements to try and offer them appointments within those windows whenever possible. Having said that, if people do not want to be seen within those periods because of their own personal commitments, then we'd be looking for a system which was flexible enough to also offer them appointments out with those times, but to be able to clearly record and audit that fact that they had deliberately chosen to be seen out with their guaranteed waiting times if that was their personal choice.
Do different healthcare services have different IT systems? Is there any standard booking software across all or some of the outpatient services? I guess this question was a bit answered with Track, but if you want to touch on that again.
The patient information system Track here is relatively standardised across the NHS. Most boards are using it. Those which aren't using it are moving on to it. Having said that, there is a wide variation in exactly how that is configured and set up. And the actual booking systems themselves, there is considerable variance. There are actually recorded instances of clinics having more than one type of booking system within a single clinic, let alone within the single hospital. So there's wide variety in operation at the moment.
This is an interesting one. How much advance notice would outpatient services need, both minimum and ideal, from a patient cancelling their appointment in order to avoid the cost of a missed appointment? So in terms of the NHS.
I think at the moment, the difficulty is depending on how much pressure the booking system's under. So they probably need 24 hours at least notice, because what they would have to do to fill that slot is start phoning. Somebody has to physically start phoning other patients on the waiting list to see if another patient will accept that appointment. So it's, theoretically it could be done within an hour if you manage to phone the next patient on the waiting list. The next patient in the waiting list lived 30 minutes away, then they could jump in the car, but that's never practical. Phone numbers are often about outdated. Patients are given their home phone number and then it works. So it can take hours for somebody to sit dedicated to fill one slot, and that's very labour intensive to fill that one slot. And what you often find is that cancellations that are less than 24 hours are often not filled because the booking service just simply doesn't have the capacity to focus on filling one single slot when they're trying to book entire clinics.
Exactly why we need something new.
But again, maybe there's some space for some innovation there, because depending on how the competition goes, you should be thinking about people trying to set up wish lists of dates they'd like to see chosen, and then you could have automatically referrals going straight to their phone or the email, their Twitter, in which case you might be able to cut out that booking system and get the patient to confirm it, and you might be able to automate a lot of that process and then cut down the space you need to refill an appointment. So there might be opportunities for innovation there if people can think of good ways of doing that.
Certainly on the referrals, there's a note saying would patients take a short notice cancellation sort of thing. So I think if that was something they could specify that they would take a short notice cancellation, and that then could be flagged up to them and say if a slot someone became available.
Is the booking line for cancellations automated or staffed? If the latter, what happens when a patient calls to cancel or rearrange out of hours, or when all operators are busy? Can they leave a voicemail?
I think that will vary from health board to health board, but I think generally it's just simply a queue. So if they can't wait in the queue, then they don't get dealt with. Basically, some of them will have a callback system. But the problem is there'll be people filing up behind that, so it's very difficult. What you often find is that people leave messages with various people, be it the secretaries, be it the reception, be it some others, and lots of people are still accessing the same clinic, making changes to the same clinic at the same time, which is quite inefficient, basically. But I don't think there's anywhere that's got an automated telephone line. I think there is no out of hours. I think it's daytime hours only. So if you want to cancel your appointment, you'll need to phone Monday to Friday.
Yeah, and it's a another person that you're
It's human. It's human. Yeah.
I've heard anecdotal evidence that where they've tried to use answering machines to allow people to leave messages out of hours, they basically had to stop doing that because the patients were not very good at recording exactly what their name was, exactly what their appointment was, who it was with. So you get these half-garbled messages. The patient thought they'd managed to cancel it, but the doctor, the booking people didn't know who it was or what clinic, so it fell apart. So that's why in those cases, I think they've all drawn back to basically just in office hours have to speak to a human being to confirm the details.
Good. What is the cost of a missed appointment? And the question says that they've seen a figure of around £160 for missed appointments. And how is this cost quantified? Do you guys have that information?
I think it varies a little bit again from health board to health board. Certainly, the health board I worked in recently quantified the cost as £136 per appointment slot. I assume that will be calculated on the staff. So there's medical staff, so the cost of the medical staff attached to a clinic, the cost of nursing staff attached to the clinic, the cost of reception staff attached to the clinic, and then obviously the building costs, so the running costs of heating, lighting, IT systems, etc., and that will simply be averaged out to give an average cost of an outpatient appointment. But it's, I think it's very consistently more than £100, quite easily £100. So, I think the reality is that there are hundreds of pieces of paper worth more than £100 sent in second-class post to patients waiting to see if they'll accept it or not. And I wonder how many people would send a cheque for £136 by second-class post.
I have a question, actually. In your opinion, what do you see being the commercial opportunity for the company that gets through? This is starting with Glasgow and with dermatology. Provided that this is successful, what's the long-term vision?
The long-term vision would be to roll it out to essentially every specialty in every health board in Scotland, which would alone be a large and considerable market. But you would then also have the ability to roll it out further, because if successful, you would then have it being proved, being used in the National Health Board, which would hopefully open wider markets elsewhere in the world, because that would be a strong, robust, reliable booking system fit for the 21st century. That's going to be attractive to a lot of healthcare systems around the world.
From your experience, what's the current state of things elsewhere?
Hard to say, but I think variable would be the best answer.
Okay. Do you need to see the same consultant each time? I guess when you referred to an outpatient slot.
You won't necessarily see a consultant each time, because most consultants will have staff in their clinics. So the reality is there may be some variability depending on the specialty, but I think patients quite often find they like the consistency of having a consultant who knows them and who knows their background and their health problems. So I think you might find the patients quite like the idea of having the same consultant, but certainly some specialties do operate a much more rotating system. So some specialties won't want you to see the same consultant every time. Some consultants will move to site, so equally patients might move from site to see the same consultant, or move consultant to stay on the same site.
Right. This is an interesting one. What languages do we need to consider?
Probably.
It's a good question. At the very basic, you're talking English, but you would have to be looking for the facility to have other common languages. As a bare minimum, you'd be looking at the sort of large ethnic groups within Scotland, starting with Polish. You'd also have to be thinking about British Sign Language. I'm not sure exactly what other large ethnic minorities might have to be considered. Having said that, at the moment the letters we send out are in English, so I think anything done to interpret to other languages would be seen as attractive additional functionality, but wouldn't necessarily have to be core. But having said that, we are trying to get a 21st century system, and therefore it would be nice to go past the 1940s style letter.
How about Gaelic?
Again, yes.
Good. A few more questions coming through. Other than the initial referral system, are there any steps of the current booking system that you don't want to change? I.e., are there any features which must be retained?
I think there will still have to be the facility to book people on the day, because some people will need short notice appointments and some people will need very fixed, rigid schedules. But other than that, I think I think we're looking for more flexibility than we currently are, rather than retaining the current system. I think in this current age, everything's very flexible, from your shopping, where you collect your shopping, to which plane you're going to fly out on. But the NHS is still very, very rigid, and I think we're looking to change that.
Are you going to be replacing the current booking system or simply adding functionality on the top of the existing system? And do you anticipate a clean state or building on what is already in use? I think this was answered before.
I think that was pretty much answered.
You're open to both at the moment. NHS Inform website as a self-help guide for numerous symptoms. In your triage solution, would you be looking for something similar? If so, would you expect the system to contact the most suitable health professional on behalf of the patient?
I think we're probably looking for the triage system to be slightly more focused than that, rather than people's first port of call. NHS Inform is very good. People's first port of call for any problem should be their GP for a new problem. What we're looking for is a triage system for people who are already known to a specialty, who are known to have a condition and are under the care of that specialty, to perhaps be offered an opportunity to have a quick phone call, rather than be brought up to clinic to discuss a problem, as opposed to allowing people who have a new dermatology problem to contact dermatology and ask for advice. I think it's about providing a much more sort of flexible system for the patients who are already in secondary care, and people who are being referred in through their general practitioner will reap the benefits of that as well.
So, I mean, while it's not dermatology, if we think about some of the other conditions, like, say, celiac disease or irritable bowel syndrome, long-term conditions, when they make the initial diagnosis, they will initially go to the GP, they'll be referred up to a specialist, but they will then have to manage that lifelong condition for the rest of their life. And so in terms of the triaging system, in those sort of cases, depending on the symptoms they have, depending on the issues they're having, it might be more appropriate for them to see a dietitian or a pharmacist or a specialist nurse. So it will be about trying to pick up what we know about the patient, knowing what condition they have, and then doing some sort of initial triage to work out roughly which professional they should be seeing in the first instance. But that's all return patients coming back into the system after they've already been diagnosed.
Well, what would you expect in terms of delivery in the period of 3 months? And with a CivTech way of working, we're expecting you to tell us that. We're expecting you to tell us how much you can deliver in 3 months and how it's going to look like. Do you guys agree? Do you guys have anything to add on that?
There would be a certain amount of minimum stuff we'd be looking for in terms of what would be able to create a minimum viable product. But Rory's absolutely right. The way CivTech works, it is a case of you guys coming to us and saying how much you think you'd be able to deliver for that. But at the very basic, we are looking for a booking system which would be able to deliver appointments within dermatology, within Greater Glasgow and Clyde Health Board. That's the sort of basic boundaries of the scope. Beyond that, it's a case of what do you think you can give us, what's attractive to us.
Yeah. Cheeky one. Given the recent cyber attacks on the NHS, do you have a dedicated information security team to test the robustness of this proposed solution, or would you prefer it if we seek a reputable security consultancy firm to provide us with their assessment? Would you expect this to be included in the initial submitted form?
I think that's something we possibly hadn't. I think that's something we'll have to consider now in light of the new sort of or what happens in the past week or so. I think the reality is the IT departments and the health departments are the departments who provide the internet security at the moment, along with the national sort of procurement of programmes. And obviously there have been issues raised, and that's varied from health board to health board, how many problems they've had. So I think the answer to that is we will have to look at security again in light of the cyber attacks, and question whether it would be something delivered locally or whether we have to think about something external to be, you know, I think more cyber attack proof than we were previously, I think.
My very cheeky answer would be, the good news about the cyber attacks is that once the data gets encrypted, the information is even more secure because nobody can read it. But being serious, you're right, it's something we will need to think about. In the first instance, it would be having to link in with our e-health departments and probably getting a steer from them about how they wanted to take it. But I think open to options there at the moment.
And I think this is one of the things that it will be discussed during the creation of the product, because these guys will be here to help during the accelerator. You will have constant contact whilst you create the product. So all of these decisions can be referred to a later date.
Yeah, well, I think the NHS is probably going to have a good think about what's happened. I think so. I think on a national scale, I think there's going to be a lot of discussion about internet security. But obviously, the cheeky answer would be don't base your program in XP, wouldn't it? So.
Good one. Would you expect the system to be hosted by NHS IT infrastructure, or would you expect a standalone solution?
In terms of the holding of the patient information, that absolutely has to be within the NHS infrastructure. We get very careful, I think would be the diplomatic way of putting it, if we're talking about trying to move patient information out with that. In terms of the programme itself, we would probably be expecting it to be hosted within the NHS, simply for terms of being able to control it and then being able to ensure the reliability. But we'd be open for that if there were good reasons why parts of the system should be hosted out with it. Then yes, let's have that conversation and work out what would deliver the best solution.
Yeah. We'll be live for about 10-15 minutes more. So if you have your questions, send them now to civtech@gov.scot, and we still have a few to go through. NHS England as an online booking system, are there reasons why you haven't adopted this?
There's quite a difference in the way NHS England and NHS Scotland's work. I think choosing book is about choosing a site at the general practitioner level. We're talking about giving patients much more flexibility to change their appointments, to make and change their appointments, and also communication with patients. So again, if that one single letter goes missing, then there's the opportunity to follow that with more contact and more communication. So rather than sitting at, you know, this sort of point of referral and saying I'd like my referral to go to X hospital, what we're saying is the patient will be referred as they would previously be, they'll be accepted as previously be, but what they would do is be offered the opportunity to take a number of slots through that department to find the one that suits them best. And again, at a time that suits them best, and if it doesn't matter if it's out with 12 weeks, if that's what the patient wants, if it's out with 18 weeks, if that's what the patient wants. So it's about patients having a lot more choice than they previously would, and not just for news, for return appointments as well.
Choosing book is very much a sort of commissioning based model. It's about trying to establish competition between the hospitals, whereas in Scotland we've been very clear we're trying to do it in partnership and collaboration, not creating competition between hospitals. So this is very much, as Fiona says, about trying to simply give patients more choice, more control over their appointments.
Yeah. What minimum and what appropriate information will be made available for the bookings? I'm not sure I really understand the question. I guess it's,
is that to the patients, or is that?
Yeah, I think that's the information that goes back to the patients. But if you'd like to clarify with another email the question. I
mean, I think if we're actually what's going to be available to the patient, it's going to be an invite to make an appointment. So your dermatology appointment is due to be made, and what would be available to them was the sort of list of available slots. You know, different days, you can move across days, across weeks, across mornings and afternoons, depending on where the clinics are running. And basically, the patients would be able to then go in and choose what suits them best. And if they find next week or after they've booked their appointment that doesn't suit them, they could equally go back in and see what else is available and change to a different appointment slot. So that's what we're really looking for patients to make available available is a notification that they're due to be booked, that they should be logging onto the system to make an appointment, and then the appointments that would be available to them to book.
What APIs are currently available for use? It's probably more a question for API. So it's a system that you can connect the data to start using the data from elsewhere. So is there any NHS APIs that the companies trying to submit solutions could tap into?
Short version, because we're dealing with multiple booking systems, all configured in multiple ways, all tying into multiple patient information systems, which are configured in different ways, all tying into different board IT infrastructure configured in multiple ways. Short answer, no.
Is that publicly available data at all?
In terms of
current bookings and levels of bookings and capacity?
There's a small amount of information which has been sort of pulled together to give a broad overview of the infrastructure. That was pulled together in a document which will be either on Public Contracts Scotland or put on PCS very shortly. So that gives a sort of very broad overview of the infrastructure. But that's pretty much all that's in the public domain at the moment. But kind of deliberately too, because we're focusing on one board, Greater Glasgow and Clyde. So I think in terms of the initial exploratory discussions, it will be about linking in with eHealth to discuss how to make it work in Greater Glasgow and Clyde, as opposed to worrying at this point about the variety elsewhere in Scotland.
We received the clarification about the previous questions that we had about the minimum and appropriate information that will be made available, and it's the information to convey to and fro, for example, patient name, date of birth, treatment, departments, clinician, etc. How much of this information should be available on the solution?
Minimum. I think the answer is, I think we're obviously dealing with confidential data, and in fact extends as far as confidentiality extends as far as the patient knowing a patient has an appointment for a particular specialty. So I think that the answer would be the minimum. I think we'd be open to suggestions, but whether the patient created their own account and that was very unique to them. So I think you basically you have a CAI number, which is a very unique sort of data number for a patient. Other than that, you'd want to keep the information very much to minimum.
We've received some questions here that we've already read out and answered, but if you missed that, the video will be available on YouTube afterwards. You can check it from the beginning after the live session is over. Let me see if we have some more questions coming through.
Just while we're doing that, I think one other thing to say is obviously there are strict information governance protocols and requirements when it comes to the sharing of information. So even the use of a CAI number or patient data, there will be steps which we'll have to jump through, and that will be part of the initial discussions during the exploratory stage.
Could you please provide us with some wider context? What are the strategic drivers behind the competition? What does this link in? How does this link into the wider strategy for the NHS?
I think part of that I covered at the start of this, but we're working on a program called the Modern Outpatient Program, which can be summed up very simply as, in future we want patients to be seen by the right person at the right time. At the moment, it's a very traditional model where people go and see their GP and then they're referred into the specialty clinic to see the consultant. What we're hoping to do, sorry, I'll go back to stage. What we're seeing in Scotland is a lot of people with multiple long-term conditions where it's not just a case of go and get fixed, go away, but they are having to live and manage with those long-term conditions for a large part of their life. So what we're looking for is a system which is more flexible, and by system I'm not just talking about the booking system, I'm talking about the wider NHS system, but a system which is more responsive and which can see patients when they need to be seen by the person who needs to see them. So that will not always be going into the big hospital to be seen in a traditional outpatient clinic. That will be about seeing the correct specialist in the correct place. So that might be walking into the pharmacy, it might be seeing a specialist nurse, it might be going going back to the GP. Even when you're seeing people who traditionally have operated out of hospital, you might not actually be going into the hospital to see them. So that's a sort of wider context. It's very much about trying to deliver a more responsive, flexible service, one where patients don't just get seen routinely after every 3 months or 6 months, but where they have the capability for themselves to stick their hand up and say, I've been fine for the last year, but I now need help. Please, can you refer me in? And where the patients are then given the choice of seeing the correct specialist for whatever issue they have at that point in time. So hopefully you can see how the booking system will be a very large part of that in terms of giving the patients more flexibility and more control over their lives, but also hopefully signposting them to the right clinician at the right time. So that's a sort of wider...
I think from a clinician perspective, dermatology is a specialty that, as I said earlier on, is a very big demand, capacity and equity, but I don't think there's a specialty in the NHS who feels comfortable, who thinks they've got enough capacity and are sitting there feeling, we're working within our comfort zone here. And I think you sit in clinics and you lose 10% of your capacity through people failing to attend, and that's just the news. The DNAs are probably more than that, and that's quite consistent across specialty. That's not something unique to dermatology. And you sit in the clinic, which might be running late because the parking's terrible and people have been struggling to get a parking space. They come, they're frustrated, they're already upset because their boss is giving them a hard time for taking time off work. And what you find is that actually things are pretty stable. They didn't actually need to spend half an hour looking for a parking space and half an hour sitting in a waiting area full of lots of other people to tell you that everything is okay, and then go away again. So I think for the clinicians, we need to find different ways of giving the best possible service for patients, because none of us feel that we have a comfortable amount of capacity. And I think for the patients, the traditional system is not working particularly well for them. And I think offering them the flexibility they have in other walks of life is, and as I said right back at the start, when we started talking about this, if you want to, you can choose to have your groceries delivered, and you can order them at 3 o'clock in the morning. If you want, you can buy your tickets, you can buy your sofa in Argos. You can book your flights, etc., etc. But the NHS comes down to bits of paper being sent out in second-class mail, and a fixed appointment that's very difficult to change. So we're well behind what people can do in other walks of life, and in healthcare. And healthcare is incredibly important part of people's life and well-being. Their social well-being, their emotional well-being, and even their financial well-being when it comes in a recession where people are struggling to find employment and keep employment, being well and not having to take lots of time off work, it can be very important and make a big difference to them.
The way it was described by one person was, we need to move from a system where it's the letters which were appropriate in the 1930s and the 1940s to a system where it's basically Ticketmaster for the NHS. And I think that's a good way of describing the sort of system we're hoping to see, the sort of expectations we've got. It's very much about moving things forward and delivering something which is fit for the 21st century.
Great. Many big organizations use have their operating systems locked, and they're using software such as Microsoft Windows. If the solution is to be hosted by the NHS, can this solution be run on Linux or other operating systems?
Should be able to, yes. A lot of the servers in the background of the NHS do run Linux, so that shouldn't be a problem. Although, again, that would be something which would need to be checked with the eHealth very quickly in the exploratory stage to make sure they were happy with that.
Yeah, technical questions like this, it's good that they're coming through, and it's good that you're thinking of them now. Some parts of it will be answered now, some parts of it will be answered at exploration stages, some other parts will be discovered at the accelerator stage. What would classify the project to be a success? And I guess these two questions can go on together. What is the minimum key performance indicator that must be met?
I don't think we've set a minimum key performance indicator. I think what we're looking for is a functioning system. So I think what we're looking for is that at the end of it, the way we book patients is not the same as we book them right now. So we are not sending patients out fixed appointments on a piece of paper in second-class post. Patients are booking themselves when they want to. And I think key performance, if the easiest to measure will be DNAs and slots lost to last minute cancellations, and I would expect improvement in there. I think I think when you look where there is patient focused booking, it's very labour intensive because it's again very human, but there is a smaller DNA rate. So you'd be looking for the DNA rates to improve, you'd look for the last minute cancellations to improve, but you'd also be looking for patient satisfaction to improve as well, and you'd be looking for some patients to have been offered an alternative way of being seen and being managed. That's more difficult to quantify, but that's hopefully part of what the system will offer as well.
But certainly in terms of metrics which are easy to measure, DNAs is an important one for us, but also the idea of patient satisfaction would be something where we could hopefully design something which could then show an improvement in patient satisfaction.
Pretty good questions coming through.
Yes.
Who would decide the patient's which clinician should the patient see, or if the patient should go to the nurse or the pharmacy? Are triage rules already established, and what factors that the system needs to take into account that otherwise the receptionist or the person booking the appointment wouldn't have in their head, and they know off the top of their head?
I think that's going to be quite difficult to quantify at this stage, and I think particularly because that will vary a little bit from specialty to specialty. So I think depending on the specialty, there might be strong links with pharmacy. Dietitian, we talked about dietitians for celiac disease, which is a gastroenterology condition, which would be dietitians are very key. Now, the sort of impact in celiac disease or gluten sensitivity in the dermatology patients is very small, so the dietetic links to dermatology might be much less, but nurse-led might be much stronger in dermatology and less so in other conditions. So I think the idea of allowing some individuality depending on the specialty, so how that triage system works, will be important, because I don't think you could actually say it's going to be one or the other for every specialty.
And it's important to say it's not something which is necessarily happening in this way at this point in time. It's something we are hoping to move to, but at the moment don't think that people can phone up and then the person at the end of the phone can direct them to the nurse specialist or the consultant or whatever. This is us trying to use the benefits of modern technology, of artificial intelligence expert systems, to try and move us on to free up the capacity, because at the moment we know that our consultants in the traditional outpatient clinics are seeing a lot of patients who could be better seen in other ways. So it's about trying to find ways where you can fire them to those other channels immediately, which will then free up the capacity to allow people to be seen by people like Fiona when they really need to be.
For patients that have mobility restrictions and need assistance, how do you cater for these patients with special needs just now?
Well, I think all NHS hospitals are designed for patients with disabilities. There's obviously the patient ambulance service, which provide transport for patients who need it. That's something ideal, which we could think of as another area that could integration, so that patients at the same time as booking their appointment could book their patient transport and know that's available, because at the moment patients book it themselves. And again, at short notice, it's quite often very difficult for that transport to be available. But again, if patients are booking it at the same time, that will take some pressure off the ambulance service, who are fielding a huge number of phone calls about transport at the moment, because again, it's all done on telephones. But it would also allow them probably to predict what's coming up, so they have a better idea of what which patients from which areas are going to be transported, and hopefully help them to plan their sort of routes, if you like, their patient ambulance routes much more effectively.
You can even pick multiple patients on the way.
That's how they do it at the moment, but I think if they could have a sort of digital system and a planning system to know that what was coming up, rather than people sitting on a phone line.
Are there any current developments of work within the NHS Scotland that may impact on this challenge, or that may need to be taken into account?
I think there's probably one health board who might be trying to do something like this slightly different, but they're doing that very much as an individual health board. So I think we're trying to establish for all health boards, whether that health board wants to adopt this system or not it will be entirely up to them later on. But I don't see it as a competition. It's a health board trying to use their service work a solution for their service. We're trying to work a solution for NHS Scotland.
There are other developments which may sort of bump into this competition. The one I'm thinking of is Attend Anywhere, which is a system we're currently trying to implement within NHS Scotland to allow for video conferencing of outpatient appointments where possible. So again, we'd be looking for this booking system to be able to tie into that in due course, so that when you're making an appointment, it would be able to flag up, are you willing to do this through VC? If so, click here, or possibly even something coming from the hospital end in terms of this appointment is not suitable for VC, you'd have to be seen in person, or this would be very suitable for VC, you know, have this as a default option if possible, that sort of thing. So certainly trying to link into to Attend Anywhere would be something I think would be looking for fairly quickly. Again, the NHS Inform has been mentioned. There could be the possibility for links there in terms of signposting patients to information and advice in terms of helping them to manage their long-term condition on an ongoing basis. It might be that even if they have a flare-up while they're waiting for their outpatient appointment, there are basic steps they should be taking in the interim. So there might be the possibility to have some links there. So those would be two which off the top of my head jump up.
And we have two more questions here. So if you have some extra questions, please fire them to civtech@gov.scot and I'll read them through before we finish. What are the key risks that we may need to consider?
I think the first one which jumps up to me is it's the old question of we need a system which is both secure and easy to use for people, because we are talking about confidential patient information which will have to be secured in a highly secure manner. But on the other hand, you're talking about a system which will hopefully eventually be used by a large proportion of Scotland's population, and therefore it will need to be simple and easy to use, and you will have to have a system which can be dealt with both people who have low technical literacy, low health literacy, people who are not used to using computers or mobile phones or anything like that. It's an old challenge. I don't think it's been fully solved before. And yes, we are asking you to solve it as part of this challenge. But I think how we get that balance right will be one of the key risks here. I think another one which has to be taken into account is, as we've already discussed, how it will integrate with the existing NHS IT, because we do have a lot of legacy IT systems, and we will need something which is fit for purpose, which is secure, which is robust, but can integrate with the existing systems. So I think those would be the sort of two big risks which need to be thought of and considered up front.
And what kind of support and access will you provide the successful applicants going through exploration stage and then the accelerator stage?
Do you want to start with what you can offer them?
Well, I think we have the clinical know-how. We know how the systems are working at the moment. We have IT and e-health departments who know how the systems are working right now. We know what we want to achieve for patients. So we have the kind of vision of what we want to achieve and what we want it to look like. And we have the support of the sort of technical staff who are working with the current NHS systems who can help with providing background to that and integration for that. So that's what we can sort of provide from a sort of clinical perspective.
On a day-to-day basis, I'll probably be the main point of contact for the successful companies in terms of being able to hopefully translate NHSEs into plain English for you, to act as the point of contact of if you're coming with questions. If I can't answer them myself, so I'll be able to fire them into the experts. When you need to talk to the clinicians like Fiona, we can set that up. When you need to go and talk to eHealth, we can set that up. When you're looking for the technical information about infrastructures, I will hopefully send you all the background information and then set up the meeting for you to discuss in more detail. So hopefully we can provide that sort of expertise. I think also the other thing to mention is we also have the ability to access patient groups. So in terms of being able to test out the system, we should be able to provide access to patients who are able and willing to test the systems and to allow you to get that feedback. Because obviously at the end of the day, we're looking for a system which patients can use and that they're not only can use but are happy to use and find is better than the existing system.
Not all people may have access to online. What inclusion requirements are there?
Within the structured government at the moment, we very much have a digital first philosophy, which is why we're pushing ahead with this. It's the idea that things should be delivered online whenever possible. Having said that, we do fully understand that not everybody will be able to do it. Some people who don't have the technical literacy to do it. Some people, particularly in the remote and rural areas, who simply don't have the connectivity to do it. Other people who particularly some of the elderly people or the people who haven't had the life opportunities, who aren't happy or confident in using computers. So yes, there will always have to be a plan B. Plan B might well be that they still have the option to pick up the phone and phone the clerk in the ward booking thing where possible. But obviously we are hoping that if you get 80-90% of people going through the online website, then that will free up the clerical time, and it means that you might actually be able to be answered within 10 or 15 minutes as opposed to hanging on for 4 hours, as it sometimes can feel like at the moment.
Would patients be allowed to use it over smartphones and apps, and what additional security considerations need to be taken into account for a mobile-based engagement?
Short version, I think we're up for that discussion, absolutely. A lot of people do have smartphones these days. A lot of people essentially run their lives on smartphones these days. So yes, anything that we can do to help facilitate that and to make things easier for patients, absolutely. I personally think that if you can get it onto the smartphones, you've got good opportunities to try and reduce the DNA rates, because you can then have the phones reminding people. Heck, these days you can even have the phones printing out the map to show them how to get to the hospital. So I think there's good opportunities there. In terms of the additional security, again, that's something where we probably need to have the chat. One of the key things which need to be sorted out is, at the end of the day, it's a patient's own mobile phone, and if they put personal sensitive information on that and it then gets uploaded to the cloud in America, that's kind of their responsibility, but it has to be an informed decision. So we might have to have that discussion about how much is the patient's responsibility to take responsibility for personal information on their phone, and to what extent do we need to have that secured and ring fenced so it stays on the NHS systems as much as possible. I don't think there's an absolute answer to that, and we'd be up for having that conversation in more detail.
I think although we do have to be very cautious about security, I think the booking system is not going to have people's past medical history or previous clinic letters or something. It's not going to have that access. It's going to be as I say, a patient's appointment for a specialty is confidential in the same way as anything else, but it's a limited amount of confidential information. And I think if we can, the idea of maybe having a patient's own username and password and these sorts of things, rather than having to log on with their own information, you could again at that kind of entry level limit how much confidential information they're actually giving, and certainly the system will set apart. If it's integrating with the patient information system, that again integrates with another system that actually contains the patient's actual medical information. So the systems are not all one; they are separate from each other.
How would the solution be expected to respond to the reality that outpatient appointments sometimes run over into another appointment, potentially making the NHS lose patient confidence in the system?
I don't think the programme is meant to develop that at all. I think it's what I would anticipate is it would improve these sorts of things, because at the moment you have lots of people booked in. There's people who don't necessarily need to be there, and there are people who are very complicated and need lots of time, who do need to see a clinician, who do need to see a consultant, need a lot of time. There are also at the moment, because we're booking everyone into the system, people who are struggling are often thrown onto the clinic as well as what we call overbooking, to sort of try and accommodate these people, because there simply is no space, and that's why clinics tend to run late. If we can offer alternatives to patients who don't necessarily need to sit in a waiting room, then that will take the number pressure off the clinics and will allow only the people who really need to be seen, and you can actually extend clinic appointments, potentially book less people onto the clinic, which sounds, why are you booking less people? But you've moved all the other people onto something else that suits them better, and you're giving the people who are complicated and struggling the time that they actually need to be dealt with appropriately. And if you have that time at a consultation, then you're potentially going to have less consultations and less follow-up stop phone calls because you've dealt with it all within the clinic appointment, rather than trying to do as much as you can in a very time pressured because you know there's another 7 people waiting to see you. So I think it will actually improve the way the clinics are run, and I think it will improve patient confidence. But the booking system is not designed for that. They will get a slot, and if the clinic is running late, the clinic is running late, and people will expect that. But if we can offer them an online consultation instead, then they are not losing anything at all apart from that consultation time. If it runs late, they can be sitting at their office desk working until the sort of the pop-up comes for them to speak to. So they've actually not lost anything at all because they've been working during that. They've not had to travel. They've not had to do anything else other than just wait for that appointment to pop up. So that will give them that opportunity as well.
I'm looking forward to this NHS.
And even when it is a case that somebody has to go and attend the clinic in person, and if it happened the clinic's running late, at least it's the fact we've given the opportunity of when and where they want to see the clinic. So you're still giving them that choice, you're still giving them the opportunity. It is still an improvement over the current system.
Yeah, I mean, if they've booked it on their day off, they're going to be a lot less concerned about how long they have than they've been given an appointment in the day where they start. They've got back shift, and if they don't get away in the next 15 minutes, they're going to be late for the work.
We have 2 more questions here. So again, if you have any last-minute questions, send us to civtech@gov.scot. How would patients be informed about the availability of the new way of doing bookings?
I think what we are anticipating is the idea that the patients will be sent out to letters saying, you've been referred to the dermatology clinic, please visit this website to book your actual appointment, which is how they've been notified. But that's just how we're imagining it at the moment. I'm kind of assuming that some of you will have far better ideas. That's certainly very much open for discussion and might depend on the sort of ideas that you come to us with.
Personally, I'd like to say about multimedia again, because I think from my experience as a clinician, patients don't often read letters, and I think you are dealing with people with different literacy levels, and I think sometimes letters can get complicated and people will sometimes put them down. I think lots of people watch YouTube, they watch TV programs, etc. online, and I think a very simple video explaining the whole process to them will be worth, and something they go back to again and again, will be worth 1,000 explanatory booklets. So I think we need to, again, if we're doing a multimedia system for booking, I think we should use the same resources to educate patients and have patients understand how this new system now works.
Could the appointments be rescheduled as a Skype video call?
I think that will depend on. I think we talked about that earlier, and I think that's, there are separate streams about virtual clinics, and there are certain groups who actually might do quite well with a virtual clinic, and I think you might actually book whole virtual clinics where people are directed towards a clinic that will be virtual patients who are all well controlled, are happy, and you have a quick chat with them via video link rather than bring them up to clinic. So I think there will be scope for that, and I think that's a separate pathway. And I think virtual clinics are coming. They're not suitable for everyone, and they're not suitable for every specialty. But I think if you choose the right areas, then they can be very useful different way of patients having a consultation. As I mentioned a few minutes ago, patients being able to sit at their desk and work up until their appointment happens and then go back to work immediately afterwards. They're maybe losing 5 or 10 minutes out of their day, which their boss will never notice, versus maybe 2 or 3 hours for a clinic appointment.
I think I need to stop saying that we need more questions, otherwise we'll be here until tomorrow.
The one sort of technical thing I'd mentioned to that is it wouldn't be Skype, though. We have got a program called Attend Anywhere. You can Google it, Attend Anywhere. There's a demo site set up so you can take a look at it, which is slightly more sophisticated in terms of typing. That has got a back end which allows the clinics to manage the waiting list so they can see how many patients have logged on and are waiting to see them and stuff like that. So similar to Skype, but technically different.
Would the online system be integrated fully in real time with other bits and pieces that allow booking, such as after hours or direct to the clinic, so that the double booking can be avoided?
Well, I think if you, at the moment, if you want to go to a concert and you go onto Ticketmaster, there's lots of people logging onto the system at the same time trying to book appointments, and your appointment is secured for, or your tickets and your particular seats are secured for, 7 minutes to allow you to complete that booking. So I think an idea like that, so if people can sort of secure it and have a wee think about it, the chances are out of hours, there's going to be only that system booking, because we're not going to have humans booking appointments at 3 o'clock in the morning. Out of hours don't book into secondary care. So it's very, they don't book into specialist clinics. So I think the idea would be that if you can secure a slot to complete your booking, and then if you don't secure that slot, it becomes available. So I think the sort of Ticketmaster idea that we talked about earlier would be exactly what you'd be looking for.
And I guess eventually all the other booking systems will have to be integrated with this booking system, so we don't miss a step. Last question I have here. How do you send letters through the post just now? Is it an automated system or a manual process?
Manual.
Okay.
So it's still humans. There is each health board will have a sort of booking system, referral management service, who are a group of people who will take the waiting list, look at the next person on the waiting list and book them to the next available suitable appointment. That letter is printed out, it's put in an envelope, and it's sent in most cases second class post. And short notice ones are sent first class, but most cases it will be sent. The longest delay I've heard between the appointment being posted and the appointment actually arriving is a year.
Okay.
And the patient turned up a year late for his appointment and was quite irate that he had been seen actually. It was when he discovered he actually, because he failed to attend the first appointment, be given a second appointment, had been seen and sorted, but then had a subsequent appointment through, didn't really understand why it came through again, came in, sat down, was quite upset the clinic wasn't on until he realised it was from the previous year. So fortunately saw the funny side and then went home, none the worse for it.
I mean, the level of automation we're talking about at the moment, I believe there's a couple of boards which have automatic letter folders to help save the staff time in terms of folding the paper before it goes into the envelope, but that's the level of automation we're currently talking about.
Would the system allow for the registration of new patients?
Probably not in terms of we would be expecting patients to be registered with a GP. In the first instance, the GP will still stay as the primary gatekeeper, so you would be looking for the patient to go to their GP, then be referred up to the outpatient appointment. But at that point, once they're in the system, that's when the booking system would take over, both for the new the first appointment and subsequent ones.
The current system. The current sort of booking system, or the patient management system, actually controls the list of all registered patients. All registered patients are on that. When they're registered, they go on to that. So this is downstream from this. This would be integrating with that system. So when a patient was registered, they would go onto that system, and then, but again, they would have to be referred in before they would be looking to be accessing the system to book an appointment. So there would be a referral at the start of this. So it's kind of slightly downstream of registration.
Another one. GP appointments are not going to be managed by this system. That's a question, even though.
Correct, yes. Certainly at the moment, we're strictly talking about outpatient appointments. Maybe sometime long in the future, we'd look to move on to the GP appointments, but at the moment, we're strictly talking about secondary care outpatient.
Okay, guys, that was the last question I have through. Thanks very much for joining us, everyone. Do you have any messages that you'd like to leave that you think we haven't fully covered today?
I think the questions have been fairly comprehensive. All I'd say is it's about, we are looking for new ideas. We are looking for you to come up with the innovative solutions. We don't want to be restrained by the old traditional systems. We are wanting you to come up with brand new ideas which will move things on. So please, a lot of what we've been talking about have been the traditional methods, but that's because we've got what we've got in place at the moment. But please don't be restrained by that. Please come to us with as wild and wacky ideas as you can think of, please.
I think for this system, as a clinician, I think what we're looking for is to be in at the coalface, if you like, and the very grassroots of building this system, because most often we are brought a system that's halfway through or almost complete, and try to adapt it towards what we need. What we're looking for is to build it, with, in combination, we want to be in at the start to build what we think is going to work best for us.
Okay, thanks very much, everyone, for joining. The video will be available for you to watch anytime. If you have any further questions, please send them through to Public Contract Scotland, to the Relevant Challenge, and Fiona and David will kindly respond. Thanks very much and have a good weekend.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.